After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the term globalization, learn how globalization affects a country and its people, identify the factors that influence the spread of globalization, evaluate the positive and negative aspects of globalization, analyze whether the globalization is good or bad for a particular country.
Globalization. Globalization is the process of international integration arising from the exchange of worldviews, products, ideas, and other aspects of culture. In other words, globalization is a process of integrating people, companies, and governments of different nations through trade investment, which are aided by information technology. It can affect in several ways. For example, it has effects on environment, culture, society, physical well-being, and most importantly, on prosperity. Roland Robertson, professor of sociology at the University of Aberdeen, defined globalization in 1992 as the compression of the world and the intensification of the consciousness of the world as a whole. Sociologists Martin Elbrow and Elizabeth King defined globalization as all those processes by which the people of the world are incorporated into a single world society. In The Consequences of Modernity, Anthony Giddens defined globalization as the intensification of worldwide social relations which link distant localities in such a way that local happenings are shaped by events occurring many miles away and vice versa. Swedish journalist Thomas Larsson, in his book The Race to the Top, The Real Story of Globalization, states that globalization is the process of world shrinkage, of distances getting shorter, things moving closer. It pertains to the increasing ease with which somebody on one side of the world can interact to mutual benefit with somebody on the other side of the world. The 19th century witnessed the advent of globalization approaching its modern form. Industrialization allowed cheap production of household items using economies of scale, while rapid population growth created sustained demand for commodities. Globalization in this period was decisively shaped by 19th century imperialism. After the First and the Second Opium Wars, which opened up China to foreign trade, and the completion of the British conquest of India, the vast population of these regions became ready consumers of European exports. It was in this period that areas of sub-Sahara, Africa, and the Pacific Islands were incorporated into the world system. In the 1990s, due to change in the world economic order and due to heavy pressures from the rich countries like USA, Japan, European countries, dominating the World Trade Organization, which was established in 1995 and have 135 members, International Monetary Fund and World Bank got engaged in the development of financing activities. The developing and the poor countries all over the world were forced to open their trade and market and allow foreigners to share their major chunk of a business. The process of globalization has proponents and critiques. Proponents of globalization, which includes Jagdish Bhagwati, a former advisor to the UN on globalization, holds that although there are obvious problems with overly rapid development, globalization is a very positive force that lifts countries out of poverty by causing a virtuous economic cycle associated with faster economic growth. Economist Paul Krugman is another staunch supporter of globalization and free trade with a record of disagreeing with many critiques of globalization. He argues that many of them lack a basic understanding of comparative advantage and its importance in today's world. Whereas there were other people as well who played the role of opponents like Joseph Stiglitz, who argues that countries that have managed globalization on their own have succeeded in reaping benefits from globalization, while countries that were economically managed by international institutions such as IMF have not gained as much from globalization. Similarly, Helena Norberg-Haug, the founder of ISEC, criticizes globalization in many ways. She claims that centuries of ecological balance and social harmony are under threat from the pressures of development and globalization. She also criticizes the standardization and rationalization of globalization as it does not always yield the expected growth outcomes. India started the process of globalization and liberalization in 1991 under the Union Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. The first 5 years of globalization did not yield much appreciable results. The coming of multinational cold drinks manufacturers like Coke, Pepsi and others like McDonald's, KFC, Boomer, Chewing Gum, Uncle Chips, Cornflakes only dominated the show. Due to further liberalization of trade and the privatization, the late 1990s started showing the effect of globalization by the coming of many more MNCs, especially giant car manufacturers like Daewoo Motors, Ford, Honda, Hyundai, which resulted in availability of varieties of cars and reduction of domestic car prices. Electronic giants like IBM and world leaders in the telecommunication sector like Ericsson, Nokia, Iowa, etc. delivered wide range of quality products at affordable prices and brought a major revolution in Indian electronic industries. In the power sector, Enron, AES, Sesco are dominating the show. The price level of many products came down due to cutthroat competition and Indian consumers got the benefits. As a result of all this, the industrial sector got a major boost. Due to globalization and liberalization, the Indian market is flooded with quality foreign products. Toys, bicycles and motorbikes from China, soaps and toiletries from Indonesia and Malaysia, cheese and fruits from Australia and many more await the Indian consumers with the lifting of trade restrictions. The biggest contribution of globalization is in the field of quality and development of products with various features to suit the Indians. There are varieties of semi-processed food products to suit every Indian, every taste in the market, which has helped us to save time. Globalization has contributed tremendously to have access to important information towards quality education. Due to globalization, the communication sector has got a tremendous boost. We now have cell phones, internet, the availability of latest drugs, along with good doctors sitting across the web to advise, which are helping to save valuable lives. Now wide choices are available to select electronic goods. Life is more comfortable with cheaper air conditioners. Most importantly, the unscrupulous Indian manufacturers are not able to take us for a ride. Thanks to globalization, we have some Indian companies competing globally due to a better economy and technological competence. Globalization has led to increase in employment. Companies are hiring from developing countries because of easy availability of labor force, which ultimately increases the income of the host country, and people themselves are migrating from one place to another in search of various job vacancies. Due to establishment of numerous educational institutes, it has aided the population by spreading the education across worldwide. It has brought fierce competition in the markets and prices as a result has fallen to competitive level. Huge firms are investing in the developing countries by setting up industrial units outside their home country and consequently helping in the economic growth in the host country. It allows poor countries and their citizens to develop economically and raise their standard of living. On the other hand, creation of an unfettered international free market has benefited multinational corporations in the Western world at the expense of local enterprises, local cultures and common people. In the presence of globalization, the market gets widened, which increases the scope and demand for a product. Producers customize their products and services according to the requirements of various economies. Though globalization and liberalization of trade have resulted in the availability of large number of quality products at reasonable price, the overall economic benefits are negated due to the slow death of small scale and traditional goods producing sectors employing a large population. The Industrial Revolution has changed the outlook of the economy. Industries are using natural resources by means of mining, drilling, etc., which puts a burden on the environment. Natural resources are depleting and are on the verge of becoming extinct. The rising cost of basic sustenance products like garments, footwear, cereals, edible oils, petrol and kerosene, medicines and healthcare items, decrease in farm output, decrease in purchasing power of poor are some of the alarming issues that have given rise to the serious doubts about the benefits of globalization. The closing of inefficient industries resulting in manpower layoff have become common. The increasing wide gap between the poor and the rich is a major cause of concern, as it will contribute to the increase in crime rates, lawlessness, anti-national activities, terrorism, abduction, blackmailing, etc. The globalization process that enables investment of foreign money may turn out to be a serious debt trap in future, as was experienced in Indonesia, Brazil, Korea, and some other countries.
Nowadays, world is becoming more and more interconnected. In today's world, economic, environmental, social, and political issues are no longer limited to the national level because the world has become so interdependent. The introduction of information technology and communication techniques, along with liberalization of trade and investment in most countries, have accelerated the process of globalization, which is an important force impacting on the economy and creating a greater competition towards markets and investments. Globalization means the reduction of the differences between one economy and another, so that trade is increasingly similar all over the world. Globalization is a process of going to a more interconnected world. Globalization also means creating networks of connection among actors at multi-continental distances, mediated through a variety of flows including people, information and ideas, capital and goods. With the advent of internet facility, the transaction costs of transferring ideas and information have fallen tremendously and have made globalization much more possible and desirable. So we can define globalization as a process of integration and convergence of economic, financial, cultural, and political systems across the world. Let us see how globalization affects business. Now, as we know, globalization has four important aspects, that is, economic, financial, cultural, and political. Let us study them in details. Economic globalization is the increasing economic integration and interdependence of national, regional, and local economies across the world through an intensification of cross-border movement of goods, services, technologies, and capital. It comprises the globalization of production and finance, markets and technology, organizational regimes and institutions, corporations and labor. It has led to economic growth along with the reduction in poverty. Financial globalization is the integration of a country's local financial system with international financial markets and institutions, which typically requires that governments liberalize the domestic financial sector and capital account. It implies that a new type of capital and more capital is available to developing countries and leads to better financial infrastructure, which mitigates information asymmetries and as a consequence reduces problems such as adverse selection and moral hazard. Cultural globalization refers to the transmission of ideas, meanings, and values around the world in such a way as to extend and intensify social relations. It involves the formation of shared norms and knowledge with which people associate their individual and collective cultural identities, bringing increasing interconnectedness among different populations and cultures. A visible aspect of cultural globalization is the diffusion of certain cuisines, such as American fast food chains. McDonald's is one of the largest global food service corporations with more than 35,000 chains serving approximately 70 million people thanks to 1.8 million employees in more than 100 countries each day. Big Macs are uniform in size and content in all countries, and consumers are able to enjoy the same burgers and nuggets regardless of their locations. Traditionally, politics has been undertaken within national political systems. National governments have been ultimately responsible for maintaining the security and economic welfare of their citizens, as well as the protection of human rights and the environment within their borders. Political activities are increasingly taking place at the global level due to global ecological changes, more integrated global economy, and other global trends. Under globalization, politics can take place above the state through political integration schemes such as the European Union and through intergovernmental organizations such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. In this way, all the aspects of globalization have different impact on a particular country, people, and business activities conducted. The effect of globalization on business can be expressed by 5 factors. The competition factor includes deregulation, which have made easier for foreign businesses to enter in local markets, so the competition level has been increased. Awareness among consumer includes activeness of the consumers related to available products. Consumers have become very much aware regarding the quality, service, and price of the product. The economies of scale include benefits of diminishing cost as firms increase its scale of operation. The ease of location includes gaining the advantage of low-cost labor and other resource charges. Joint ventures include joining of two or more firms together to produce goods and services so that they can have access to bigger markets and associated cost advantages. Let us now study the various factors in details. Globalization leads to increased competition. This competition can be related to product and service cost and price, target market, technological adoption, quick response, quick production by companies, etc. When a company produces with less cost and sells cheaper, it is able to increase its market share. Customers have a large multitude of choices in the market, and this affects their behaviors. They want to acquire goods and services quickly and in a more efficient way than before. They also expect high quality and low prices. All these expectations need a response from the company, otherwise sales of company will decrease and they will lose profit and market share. A company must always be ready for price, product and service, and customer preferences because all of these are global market requirements. Consumers have more purchasing choices than ever before thanks to the globalization movement. The internet has opened new opportunities for browsing from the comfort of home, and there are products available from all over the world. Globalization has changed consumer buying behavior in ways that could never have been anticipated. Globalization has led companies to take benefit of economies of scale. Economies of scale are the cost advantages that enterprises obtain due to size, output, or scale of operation, with cost per unit of output generally decreasing, with increasing scale as fixed costs are spread out over more units of output. Economics of scale apply to a variety of organizational and business situations and at various levels, such as a business or manufacturing unit, plant, or an entire enterprise. Globalization allows firms to increase its size and scale of operation, therefore reaping the advantage of economics of scale. Globalization allows the company to take advantage of low-cost labor available to other countries. For example, a lot of US companies are outsourcing their IT operations to India, where skilled software engineers are available at relatively cheaper cost. It also lets companies to take advantage of resources available worldwide. For example, Nestle takes raw coffee from Ghana. Globalization has led to joint ventures where a domestic firm can benefit immensely by partnering with the foreign company to gain a global presence. Strategic partnering like joint ventures are an effective way to enhance corporate growth. It allows company to improve communications and networking. Catherine Rudy Harrigan of Columbia University says that in today's business environment, joint ventures are most appropriate to topple scarce resources, rapid rates of technological change, and rising capital requirements. Joint ventures also help in developing new products. IBM and Apple has announced an alliance aiming to put Apple products with IBM softwares. Joint ventures provide opportunities to reduce risk. It is a tool for distinct competencies to complement each other. It allows few smaller firms to compete against a large firm. Joint venture lets synergistically combining unique features of companies, and globalization provides one such platform. Till last few decades, the production was limited within the countries. After liberalization, these restrictions were removed and trade became possible in any part of the world. Due to ease of capital exchange, money can be moved from one country to another in search for a better return. Due to abolition of barriers to trade, trade became cheaper, and this leads to rapid expansion of trade. Due to favorable business atmosphere, new markets have opened up in various countries, leading to increase in the income of the indigenous people. Technological enhancements are conceived as the main facilitator and driving force of most of the globalization processes. Technology can be defined as the socialized knowledge of producing goods and services. We need technology to produce either goods or services. Technology helps to improve productivity. Technology is a result of intellectual activities. It is a type of intellectual properties and is developed through research and development among the companies. Technology is also involved in improving the efficiency of instruments and automating the process. Technology is changing the world drastically. Changes in transportation technology have reduced transportation costs substantially, helping to fuel the globalization process. Since digital technology is also a means of reducing transportation costs, email is cheaper and faster than airmail. Globalization has been facilitated by the ability to move goods and services across borders at a reduced cost. Economic developments of the last few decades includes the transformation of international shipping. Just as the computer revolutionized the flow of information, the shipping container revolutionized the flow of goods. By sharply cutting cost and enhancing reliability, container-based shipping enormously increased the volume of international trade and made complex supply chains possible. Since Second World War, governments all over the world have cooperated on a variety of efforts to reduce or eliminate import restrictions and export subsidies. The idea was that liberalization would increase volume of trade, promote economic growth, and improve living standards worldwide. Liberalization also promotes accountability in trade and governance. The liberalization idea with respect to social policy refers to relaxation of restricting laws such as divorce, abortion, etc., and in terms of civil rights, eliminating the laws prohibiting same-sex marriages. Progressive liberalization also promotes progressive realization of human rights. Recently, liberalization is also broadly ensuring the promotion of corporate social responsibility, eliminating foreign exchange controls, reducing taxes imposed on foreign investors, relaxing restrictions on the purchase of domestic securities by foreign investors, the issuance of bonds by foreign borrowers, and the involvement of foreign investment banks in underwriting bonds and stocks in domestic stock markets is spreading globalization in big way. Maximizing investment return has become a global pursuit. The biggest increase in cross-border activity has been in equities. The urge to raise capital has led to major exchanges to list foreign companies. More and more companies are tapping the world market, motivated to raise capital with the desire to obtain higher valuations and increase shareholder base. Equity markets have become more global, and markets are becoming more dominant by financial institutions such as mutual funds, pension funds, insurance companies, etc. The tremendous growth of international trade over the past several decades has been both a primary cause and effect of globalization. The volume of world trade increased 27-fold from $296 billion in 1950 to $8 trillion in 2005, according to WTO 2007. As a result of international trade, consumers around the world enjoy a broader selection of products than they would if they only had access to domestically made products. Due to favorable business atmosphere, new markets have opened up in various countries, giving more and bigger markets to the companies. They have also gained due to higher growth rates and the emergence of a large number of middle-class population who has money to spend in the market in many developing countries like India. Economies of scale also helps them in cutting down their costs. Globalization is considered as a positive force, especially in the field of corporate businesses, particularly in the area of finance. After liberalization, import-export became more convenient, and hence it affected the Indian economy favorably. The number of industries has increased after the liberalization. As a result, the growth rate in the country rose rapidly after 1991. In recent times, an increase in foreign investment has been observed in India. The expansion of service sector is the most important effect of globalization in India. Multinational companies set up their factories for production in different countries and produce goods of international level. Globalization is seen as the beneficial spread of liberty and capitalism. Higher degree of political and economic freedom in the form of free trade in the developed world has produced higher levels of overall material wealth. Jagdish Natwarlal Bhagwati is an Indian-born naturalized American economist, a professor of economics and law at Columbia University. In 2004, Bhagwati published In Defense of Globalization, a book on which he argues this process of globalization has a human face, but we need to make that face more agreeable. Professor Bhagwati is described as the most creative international trade theorist of his generation and is a leader in the fight for freer trade. Jagdish Chandra Bhagwati's most recent book, Why Growth Matters, has received notice in leading magazines and newspapers like The Economist, The Financial Times, Forbes, and Wall Street Journal. His earlier book, Termites in the Trading System, discusses the deleterious effects of preferential trading agreements. Bhagwati was one of the experts who took part in the Copenhagen Consensus project. Bhagwati was also a member of the panel of eminent persons who reviewed the work of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Paul Robin Krugman, born February 28, 1953, is an American economist, professor of economics and international affairs at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University, centenary professor at the London School of Economics, distinguished scholar at the Luxembourg Income Studies Center, at the CUNY Graduate Center, and an op-ed columnist for the New York Times. In 2008, Krugman won the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science for his contributions to new trade theory and new economic geography. He is another staunch supporter of globalization and free trade, with a record of disagreeing with many critics of globalization. He argues that many of them lack a basic understanding of comparative advantage and its importance in today's world. Krugman is known in academia for his work on international economics, including trade theory, economic geography, and international finance, liquidity traps, and currency crisis. Krugman is ranked among the most influential economic thinkers in the US. Krugman has written over 20 books, including scholarly works, textbooks, and books for a more general audience, and has published over 200 scholarly articles in professional journals and edited volumes. He has also written more than 750 columns on economic and political issues for the New York Times, Fortune, and Slate. As a commentator, Krugman has written on a wide range of economic issues, including income distribution, taxation, macroeconomics, and international economics. Krugman considers himself a liberal, calling one of his books and his New York Times blog The Conscience of a Liberal. His popular commentary has attracted considerable comment, both positive and negative. It is not the case that India only benefited by globalization. The reality is that it has created several problems as well. Globalization adversely affected the small-scale industries in India, affecting small producers. They are not able to compete with the multinational companies. The jobs of labor are not secure due to globalization. The factory's owners provide temporary employment to minimize the cost. Globalization also allowed corporations to move manufacturing and service jobs from high-cost locations, creating economic opportunities with the most competitive wages and worker benefits. The globalization has caused uneven distribution of benefits. The weaker and poor section of the society is far away from the advantages of globalization. The regional disparities have increased due to globalization. Developed countries are benefited more than the developing countries. Similarly, within the country, the developed regions are benefited more than the backward region. Some critics of globalization argue that it harms the diversity of cultures. Some argue that globalization may ultimately lead to westernization or Americanization of culture. Though globalization has expanded women's access to employment, but the long-term goal of transforming gender inequalities remains unmet and appears unattainable without regulation of state. Joseph Eugene Stiglitz, born February 9, 1943, is an American economist and a professor at Columbia University. He is a recipient of the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science 2001 and the John Bates Clark Medal 1979. Joseph Stiglitz argues that countries have managed globalization on their own have succeeded in reaping benefits from globalization, while countries that were economically managed by international institutions such as the IMF have not gained as much from globalization. He is known for his critical view of the management of globalization, free market economists, whom he calls free market fundamentalists, and some international institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. He is a former senior vice president and chief economist of the World Bank and is a former member and chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. In 2000, Stiglitz founded the Initiative for Policy Dialogue, a think tank on international development based at Columbia University. Since 2001, he has been a member of the Columbia faculty, has been a university professor since 2003, and is the co-chair of the university's Committee on Global Thought. He also chairs the University of Manchester's Brooks World Poverty Institute, as well as the Socialist International Commission on Global Financial Issues, and is a member of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. Stiglitz has over 40 honorary doctorates and at least 8 honorary professorships, as well as honorary deanship. In 2001, the President of the United Nations General Assembly, Miguel Diaz-Canto-Brookman, appointed Stiglitz as the chairman of the UN Commission on Reforms of the International Monetary and Financial System, where he oversaw suggested proposals and commissioned a report on reforming the international monetary and financial system. Since 2012, Stiglitz has been the president of the International Economic Association and is currently presiding over the organization of the IEA Triennial World Congress that will be held on the Dead Sea, Jordan in June 2014. Helena Norbeck-Hodge is an analyst of the impact of the global economy on cultures and agriculture worldwide, a pioneer of the localization movement and the articulator of the core ideas of counter-development. She criticizes globalization in many ways. She claims that centuries of ecological balance and social harmony are under threat from the pressure of development and globalization. She also criticizes the standardization and rationalization of globalization as it does not always yield the expected growth outcomes. Although globalization takes similar steps in most countries, scholars such as Hodge claim that it might not be effective to certain countries, for globalization has actually moved some countries backward instead of developing them. She is a producer and co-director of the award-winning documentary The Economics of Happiness and is the founder and director of Local Futures, International Society for Ecology and Culture, ISEC. The film describes a world moving simultaneously in two opposing directions. On the one hand, government and big business continue to promote globalization and the consolidation of corporate power. At the same time, all around the world, people are resisting those policies, demanding a re-regulation of trade and finance, and far from the old institutions of power, they are starting to forge a very different future. Communities are coming together to rebuild more human-scale ecological economics based on a new paradigm, an economics of localization. Globalization refers to the process which integrate different countries economically through education, society, and politics. It enables them to view themselves not only through their national identity, but also as part of the world as a whole. Globalization has promoted import-export activities, increased liquidity of capital allowing investors in developed nations to invest in developing nations. Corporations have greater flexibility to operate across borders. Integration of global mass media became possible. With globalization, there is a global market for companies to trade their products and a wider range of options for people to choose from among the products of different nations. There is a sound flow of money and thus a decrease in the currency difference between developing and developed countries. Competitive markets does not allow charging high prices. As a result, inflation is less likely to occur.